Welcome back to the Rapid Recovery and Data Readiness webinar series. In our first session with Microsoft, we focused on disaster recovery and what it takes to recover quickly when something goes wrong. We talked about real disruption scenarios and how to move from reactive recovery to prepared recovery. But today, we're expanding that conversation because resilience doesn't stop at M365 or a single recovery event. Modern work spans SaaS applications, cloud infrastructure, identities, and data that are deeply connected. This session is about what happens beyond recovery, how organizations can protect and prioritize data across SaaS and infrastructure, where fragmentation creates risk, and why a unified approach is becoming critical as environments grow more complex. I'm joined by a great group of speakers. Timothy Botcher, our SVP of Go-to-Market Strategy and Product Marketing at AvePoint, who helps shape how we bring resilience to market. Ava Raganese, Product Marketing Manager at AvePoint, who works closely with customers and field teams on how these solutions show up in the real world. And Mary Layton, Senior Product Analyst, who partners closely with us on the actual product experience, helping shape how recovery, prioritization, and resilience come together for our customers every single day. Together, we build on our last webinar and shift the conversation beyond disaster recovery. Today, like I said, is about how resilience extends across SaaS apps and infrastructure and what it really takes to protect the environments where work actually happens. To set the stage of where we are today, we want to acknowledge the reality many organizations are dealing with. With the rise of AI, data is growing at a pace teams can't keep up with. And that data is no longer in one place. It's spread across SaaS apps, DevOps, tools, identities, and the infrastructure that supports it all. To manage that complexity, teams have added more tools, more alerts, and more dashboards. Each one is meant to help solve a problem, but only in isolation. Over time, that patchwork creates a new challenge. Instead of clarity, teams are left trying to piece together what's happening across disconnected systems. That's why cyber resilience feels harder today than ever. Not because teams lack tools or data, but because the environment has become harder to see, harder to manage, and harder to coordinate.
Too right, Grace. This is the reality most organizations are operating in today. Modern work doesn't live in just one platform. It spans across productivity and collaboration tools we know and love, like M365 and Google Workspace, but also across CRM systems, developer tools, identity platforms, and all of the infrastructure underneath it. What we're seeing with many of the clients we work with is that the ecosystems they're trying to protect looks a lot like what you see here, using many, if not all of these tools, and it becomes overwhelming trying to understand the data that you're trying to protect. How is it moving and spread across all of these different tools in this environment? In a lot of cases, the teams that we work with don't even realize all the places that their data is living or how connected these systems really are. That lack of visibility makes protection much harder than it needs to be. And it's only going to get more complex, as Grace was saying. By 2026, enterprises will manage data across 5 or more major SaaS platforms on average. And that kind of sprawl is now the norm, not an exception. This is the starting point for the rest of the conversation today. If this is where your data lives and this is where your users are working, resilience has to be designed with the full picture in mind. This is where point solutions for this sort of approach start to break down. Protection can look complete on paper. You can have all the different tools needed for protecting all the different aspects, but when these tools aren't coordinated, the recovery assumptions don't line up. Your protection might look complete. You've got all the different pieces in place for the surface area, but it's the coordination that's missing. When disruption occurs, these disconnected solutions create big gaps in visibility and hence in action. Inconsistent recovery assumptions gives you slower responses. The result is that protection looks complete. You've got all the pieces there on paper, but it breaks down at the most critical moment. This is where you need a single coordinated approach to SaaS, infrastructure, and your data sources as part of your data protection strategy. When policies and visibility are aligned, recovery is consistent, and teams respond faster when it matters most. And this is exactly why we built broad protection across both infrastructure and SaaS applications, in addition to our existing productivity cloud coverage in M365 and Google Workspace. The business doesn't just run in one place anymore, and resilience can't either. As resiliency expands across SaaS and infrastructure, the first thing the business needs is visibility. And what you're looking at here is one of our unified central command centers for an immediate picture into your data resilience posture. So you can see here we're covering all of the different sort of data sources, all of the different cloud and infrastructure sources, and giving you that instant visibility of that full environment picture of both how much you're being covered and whether there's any gaps you need to quickly pick up on, such as maybe a backup didn't complete or something's become disconnected and you can take action immediately, as well as how much data is being covered and all the different areas the coverage is happening. If you can't see what's being protected and what's changing and where the attention's needed, recovery decisions become very reactive and manual. And that's why the Resiliency Command Center here matters. This is the control plane that customers already know, now extended to cover a much broader set of environments, including, as mentioned, new SaaS apps and infrastructure sources, as well as the multiple clouds. Because you can't prioritize your recovery or your security if you can't see your environment, your whole environment. So when disruption hits, teams don't just need a backup somewhere. They need a coordinated way to monitor and recover the systems that keep that work moving across collaboration, SaaS apps, and infrastructure that underpins everything. Our focus here is simple. Resilience has to follow how the business operates in the real world. That means coverage across all of the IaaS and PaaS on one side and all of your SaaS and collaboration in one place on the other side all together, so that your recovery plans can match the reality instead of living in different silos. And of course, this also matches the rest of our data discovery and security solutions that provide a complete data protection picture in the Confidence platform. So along with resilience, we have security and governance as well, but we'll save that for another webinar. But if resilience does have to cover both infrastructure and SaaS apps, the next question becomes what it actually looks like in practice. We've mentioned a few times about data moving between different systems and being where your users are working. Disruption doesn't happen in isolation, and neither does your data movement. It moves across apps, platforms, users, and workflows every single day. So to make this real, let's walk through a simple example, one that most organizations are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and that shows why broad, connected protection is what really matters. Mary, do you want to take us through that?
Thanks, Tim. Let's ground this in something real, a business contract. Every one of these represents a partnership, a purchase, or a promise your organization is making. The contract is drafted in M365 and stored in SharePoint Online. Pretty standard so far. And then it's sent for a signature and stored in DocuSign, moving outside the original system where it was created. That contract then goes back and forth over email through Exchange as part of the negotiation and approval process. At the same time, those associated records are stored in Salesforce, tying the contract to accounts, opportunities, and revenue. And once it's signed, the real work starts. If it's a software purchase, that might kick off a project in Jira with documentation in Confluence and code stored in Bitbucket. If it's services or physical delivery, maybe that work lives in Monday.com, Microsoft Project, or Smartsheet, or some combination of all three of them. This is where your data lives, across clouds, apps, users, and workflows. This kind of sprawl isn't the exception. It's the reality that organizations are coping with every single day, and it's exactly the reality cyber resiliency has to protect. To meet this challenge, we provide comprehensive protection across 8 core sources today, with new integrations constantly being added to keep pace with your sprawl. Please reach out if there are any other sources you want to see.
Yeah, you're right, Mary. And that sprawl doesn't just stop at SaaS applications. So as that project gets executed, it expands to developers that are working on code and writing that back to GitHub. But they're going to be coding against data in databases like Azure SQL or BigQuery. If that data gets lost, it could derail projects, even deleting months of work. Infrastructure resources are well integrated into day-to-day work, whether you see it or not. Every line of business, like product development in this case, relies on databases and storage. But what if data loss happens? Data loss in SaaS environments isn't always just a server room on fire scenario. Often it can be subtle, specific to a subset of users, and can lead to fragmented application behavior that creates almost a zombie state for different lines of business. So for instance, take that one day a database of customer transactions gets deleted. No one realizes that until an analytics dashboard shows up blank one day. And someone might think, oh, the dashboard's been deleted, I need a backup tool that can recover the last version of Power BI. But in reality, the issue lies in the cloud infrastructure layer. Data loss may show up in the SaaS application, even though the real issue lies in your infrastructure. So in that scenario, you need a tool that's going to bring back the last accurate version of that database.
And that's just one example. Depending on the cloud resource, it could be more catastrophic to operations. If a VM that's executing payment transactions and calculating taxes and fees gets corrupted, suddenly all that transaction data is wrong. And that could lead to inaccurate payments, really unhappy customers, and a whole slew of problems for you. And what if it's an underlying storage bucket that a website or an agent's pulling from, and that data gets compromised or goes missing? The website's now blank because all of the images were deleted, and even that agent now has no data to go off of. So it's essentially just a zombie agent that can't operate. For a customer facing support agent, that can mean that support cases are getting pushed, customers are unhappy and logging complaints, and that all happens before you even realize that the underlying issue was the storage bucket. So that's why it's really important for organizations to think about their holistic cyber resilience strategy that includes infrastructure and platform services. We're really excited that as of our April release, Azure PostgreSQL and Cosmos DB are now live for customers. And resiliency has to follow the workflow, not the platform. Clients don't want protection stitched together across different tools. They want one place that they can understand what's protected, what's at risk, and what they can act on without adding more complexity. That's why bringing multi-cloud infrastructure into a single control plane is so important. It's how resiliency starts to feel manageable again instead of overwhelming. So for AvePoint clients, that means choosing a backup model that's flexible enough so you can manage as little or as much as you want for your backups. And our SaaS hosted option, this means that AvePoint's managing all your backup data through cloud APIs. For the customer, it means really simple configuration, nothing's hosted on your network, but that comes with the cost and resource, balancing act, right? For the CAP gateway, that allows a customer to install a cloud access point or a virtual machine on their network that hosts the backups. That means that the customer is a lot more in control, so that can be more flexible for their backup and recovery strategy. It can be more cost effective in the long run, but it does balance a bit of configuration and installation for ongoing maintenance. So overall, AvePoint allows you to balance your business and backup needs with flexible models.
And we're finishing today with what we started to bring it full circle. As we wrap up, we focused on what resilience really looks like in modern environments. Not just having backups, but navigating complexities across SaaS applications, infrastructure, identities, and data that's all deeply connected. We've talked about why cyber resilience is getting even harder. And we showed why getting back to the business starts with visibility, prioritization, and a more coordinated approach when something goes wrong. But resilience doesn't start at the moment of recovery. Long before an incident happens, many environments are already carrying hidden risk in the form of redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. And a lot of people don't know, but rot quietly increases complexity and makes recovery even harder when it matters most. That's why in our next webinar, we're shifting upstream to talk about rot and why it's the unsung hero of cyber resilience. Because the cleaner and better understood your data is ahead of time, the faster and more confident recovery becomes later. If today was about responding to disruption, the next session is about how to be prepared long before it happens. Join us for that next week, and thank you so much for your time.